And welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. Today we're talking with Madex from Bull Bitcoin and Madex Art. Madex, welcome back to the show. By the way, tell Francis I said hello.
Thank you.
Tell Francis I said hi. I haven't seen him in a long time. Tell me, how did you originally find out about Bitcoin? What's your orange pill moment or story or however you want to call it?
Well, at the time, I was looking into building a fintech app with a partner. And we had a bunch of these companies now exist, but we had the idea to create sort of an automated savings program so that you could connect your credit card or your debit card. So the idea being that you would set a tax rate for yourself on certain items, and then you would make purchases throughout the month. And then at the end of the month, X amount of your purchasing activity would be taken from your account and put into a savings account. So we were building out kind of the software for this and building out like a basic pitch deck essentially. And then the time came to kind of bring it to banks, and it was instantly clear that the banking world was a pay-to-play game and is very closed off and monopolistic. So it looked at that time we were looking to raise. We would need about like $10 million just to be able to have like tests starting to happen, just in terms of getting through the regulation and red tape and whatnot. And at the time, I had a friend who I was living with who was very libertarian, and he was like, "Well, this whole thing should just be built out on Bitcoin." And then, so that was for my partner and I in the project. We were like, "What is Bitcoin?" And then I guess the rest is sort of history. And then, as with anything, you know, when or as with most people's Bitcoin story, it took a long time. I mean, at that time, it was a very risky investment. There was a lot of issues, and so, you know, as everyone makes the same mistake, they didn't buy as much as they should have. And then around 2015, 2016, I started getting back into it, and then that kind of slowly ramped up with the push of kind of the whole like crypto and Bitcoin world coming to the spotlight. And then in 2018, I was just in the right place in the right time. My relationship with Dave Bradley in Canada, our friendship that we had established, basically led to being in a place to create the brand for Bull Bitcoin when it was time for that company to exist.
So, yeah, I think you're like most people. Most people find out about Bitcoin and then either they pass it, or if they do get some, they don't go in very deep. Then a few years later, they look at it and go, "Man, why didn't I do more of this when I was doing it? What was I thinking?" And then they start getting on the bandwagon. And once you go down that rabbit hole, I mean, it's just such a big rabbit hole to go down. Most people don't realize that once you start going down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin, you're studying Bitcoin, all of a sudden you realize what money is, all of a sudden you start finding out what banking's about, you find out what money was supposed to be in the US. I mean, you find all these things out that have been there the whole time, but you never took a second to find out. You didn't even know what money was. You find that out, that you never even knew what money was. Agree, or is that?
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I agree. I mean, how I've changed my strategy over the years, because I've pitched Bitcoin a million times, is I just don't pitch it anymore because I've realized it's inevitable. But if someone is lucky enough to get a pitch or even information from me, the best book I've been handing out currently is the Fiat Standard. I used to always give out the Bitcoin Standard because the Bitcoin Standard sort of united what the whole maximalist kind of culture had been talking about and discussing for a long time. And it was a great kind of summary of it all. But what I realized is that when you're handing the Bitcoin Standard to somebody who's not involved in Bitcoin, they may not even know that there is a problem. I think the average person just does not even understand the banking system, doesn't understand money, and doesn't understand why it's completely broken and why it's the root cause to all of the suffering that we're currently seeing in the world. So I think the Fiat Standard is a great text for explaining and enlightening the problem and saying like, hey, like this is how the system is currently working. And this is a basis in understanding of fiat, so that you can actually see the genius of Bitcoin and you can really understand like this does solve this problem. So now whenever I'm talking about Bitcoin to people who are new to it, the first thing I kind of go through is sort of, inflation, like what does it actually mean, and kind of get them to a point of like understanding that it is criminal. If you inflate a money above a supply cap, like that's a criminal act, that's theft. And that is, I think, the most important thing to understand on someone who's beginning their journey into Bitcoin.
The Bitcoin Standard and the Fiat Standard are both books by Saifedean Ammous. I think you're probably correct on the order to give those out, because to me, when you start giving out the Bitcoin Standard, there's so much information in there to begin with, like rhinestones and all these things that the just average person may not find of interest yet, which after they've read the Fiat Standard, then I think they would find that more interesting. Let me ask you real quick. In your opinion, we got about 3 minutes here for you to cover this. What is Bitcoin?
Well, Bitcoin is freedom from slavery, freedom from enslavement. It's the first time ever in human history that we have had a separation from, like old wealth and an ability for people to basically make their own decisions and build their own foundations and chart their own course. It's the first time ever that we can actually have a money that we can trust, and we have a future ahead of us where price signals will start to be accurate again. The only truth is price, and the fiat system and printing money into infinity completely screws up the incentives of the entire economy, and we get a whole bunch of noise and the government getting involved in people's business and people's transactions and thinking that they know better than individual actors, just completely destroys price signals, and the entire economy has no idea what to focus on, what to do, what's important, and where we should all be focusing our time. So for me, like that would be what I would describe Bitcoin as first, is just a way to organize our time and a way that nobody owns us anymore. Like if you run Bitcoin, if you own Bitcoin, you are, that's the first step in becoming a sovereign individual. And I would say that once you have Bitcoin, you are a sovereign individual. And then everything else from that starting point is just sort of protection and defense of that sovereignty. So I think that in the past, the only difference between a slave and a free man was the free man had the ability to carry a gun. And now I think that, but the root of being able to protect that right to carry a gun was all anchored in violence. Whereas now with Bitcoin, we have the ability to, protect ourselves with money, which is very unique and very exciting. And I think it means that the world is going to start to become a much better place, because we'll be back to dealing with each other with money, and nobody's cheating at the game anymore. And so now we can actually trust each other, and we can understand price signal from the economy.
Well, you put a lot of things out there for sure. Number one, printing money and inflation in general is probably the biggest theft of money that there is. The biggest way to steal money from the people, and the people it hurts the most are the people who have small amounts of money. People who have large amounts of money, sure, they lose the same percentage, but they don't feel it as bad as the people who don't have much money. If you're paying for gas to get to work, $500 a year, and it goes up to $800 a year, and you're making a minimal amount of money, that's a big increase on your pay. And if everything's doing that, your money's getting less and less and less and less. So that's a terrible thing. We'll be right back with Madex and more Bitcoin talk after this word from our sponsor.